Mesachtas Nedarim Daf Samach Zayin begins the 10th parak of the Masechta. We actually begin at the last line of Samach Vav. And we now begin the topic of Hafaras Nedarim, not Hataras, but Hafaras Nedarim. Hafara is a process by which a woman's husband or father can cancel her neder without having to have a Pesach, without having to have a mistaken circumstance or an unforeseen circumstance in the original neder. The halacha is that a father can cancel his daughter's nedarim as long as she is a kitana or a nara. Once she becomes a bogeres, which is age 12 and a half and up, he cannot cancel her nedarim anymore. And once she becomes a nisua, when she's married, even if she's a kitana or a nara, he cannot cancel her nedarim anymore. Now, a husband can cancel if she is married to him at any age. She becomes an Ezra and he has the right to cancel her Nedarim through Hafara. It could only be something which is relevant to him, which affects him personally, something between him and her. And he has to do it within the day that she makes the Neder, before Shkia, on the day she makes the Neder, and that applies to the father as well. Now, if a father can cancel something which is not relevant to him, is a Machlokes Rishonim. Now, what happens if a woman is a bogeres and she's not married? No one can cancel her nedarim. She's outside of her father's rishos and she doesn't have a husband. And the focus of the first Mishnah in the parak is, what is the halacha of a arusa, a woman who's mikudeshes? So we are referring to if she's younger than a bogeres, she's a nara or she's a katana. Once she's older than a bogeres, the father has no shaykhs to her anymore. Here we're talking about a nara or a katana who is still in her father's rishos and at the same time partially in her husband's rishos. How does this work? So the Mishnah begins and it says the halacha is that the husband and father have to together be meifir the neder in order for it to be canceled. They both have to be involved. Now, the Mishnah expresses this with somewhat repetitive and redundant phrases. So first it says a nara who is mu'uras, who is engaged, her father and husband are meifir her neder. The Gemara explains that this is not enough because this may sound like they each alone could be meifir the neder. That's why the Mishnah has to say the next line, the father cannot be meifir without the husband, and the husband cannot be made without the father. That teaches me that they both have to be involved, otherwise it's not hufar. And then the Mishnah adds another line, and it says you do not have to say that if one of them is mekayim the neder, meaning he says I support and I accept this neder, then the other one cannot be meifir, because like we said, you need both parties to be meifir the neder. So the Gemara asks, what is the chiddush of this line? Why do I have to say that? Obviously, if you need both to cancel, then certainly if one specifically supports it, it's not canceled. So Gemara says the chiddush is that you need to have the two cancellations not have a support in between. So the case would be as follows. If, let's say, the father says, I'm canceling, he's meifir, the husband says, I support it, then the husband goes to a chacham and he takes away his support. He cancels his support. He cancels his being mekayim the neder. He could do that just like hataras nedarim. He could do hataras kiyum. Now he goes back and he wants to be made for it. So now it's no good. He can't be made for it any longer because the husband and father were not made for it at the same time. Between the hafara of the father and the hafara of the husband was a period of kiyum. You can't combine them, and therefore it's no good. This neder cannot be canceled through hafara any longer. All right, now the Gemara wants to know, what is the source of the halacha that for a nar hamarasa, the father and husband together are meifir the neder? So we're going to have a few approaches, and we have to have a bit of an understanding of the parsha in Chumash, beginning of Parshas Matos, discussing these halachos. So there are three sections where the Torah describes hafara. The first section is talking about an unmarried girl, the daughter, and it says that if she makes a neder, her father could be matir. The second parsha talks about when she makes a neder while she's single, then she gets married, then she has kiddushin, and the Gemara is going to say maybe it refers to nisuin. The husband now wants to be meifir the neder. She made it before she was married to him, and now she wants to be meifir after she's married to him. The third parsha talks about where she makes the neder while she's married, and the husband is the one who's meifir. So the Gemara wants to know, why do I need all three parshas here. And the Gemara says that proves that the middle parsha is talking about a Nara Hamras, is talking about where she's engaged, she's not married. And the halacha is that both of them need to be involved. How do you see that? Well, the parsha explicitly talks about that the husband is one to be mefer. And because it begins with a vav hachibur, this is a Ran's explanation, because it begins with a vav and it says ve'im beisi shanadara, ve'im hayosi el ish, so that vav comes to link it to the first parsha, and therefore, there, just as the husband was involved, the husband has to be involved in the second one as well. Therefore, the middle parsha is talking about both the husband and the father, and it's talking about Kedushin. That's what the Gemara wants to say. Now, the Gemara has a number of questions where we'll get to how this works. So the Gemara says, first of all, how do you know that this middle parsha is talking about an arusa? Maybe it's talking about an nesua. It says mahoisi ish. So the Gemara says, how do you know they're talking about where she's mekudeshes? Maybe it's talking about where she's married. The Gemara says married. Married is the third parsha. If the second parsha is talking about nesua, why do I need the third parsha to talk about nesua? Obviously, the first parsha is talking about single. The second parsha is talking about mekudeshes, arusa, and the third parsha is talking about nesua. Says, no, that's not correct. The difference between the second parsha and the third parsha is that in the second parsha, she made the neder before she came into the husband's house, and in the third parsha, she made the neder in the husband's house. And therefore, the reason that it's telling me this, the third parsha explicitly tells me that the only way the husband has the right to be made for Nedarim on his own is if she made the neder in his house while they're already married. If she came into the marriage with the neder, the husband cannot make the neder, cannot be meifir the neder on his own. That should be obvious. Says the Gemara, okay, this is not a kasha. Everything works very well. The third parsha tells me that the husband can only be made for a neder on his own if the neder was made in his house. What's the second parsha for? The second parsha is now, actually, you want to tell me that it's also talking about where she's married, and what's it adding? We already know all the halachas of married. Obviously, it's telling me something else. It's talking about when she was in Arusa, and the neder was made at least while she was in Arusa, and it's saying that he cannot be made for the neder on his own while she's in Arusa, could only do it together with the husband. And again, you're saying that the husband could be made for the neder when she's in Arusa, and from the vav we learn that the father has to be involved as well. Says the Gemara, okay, so you see that the husband could be made for Nedarim, you see that the father could be made for Nedarim, maybe each one can do it independently. How do you know that they both have to do it together? So Gemara says, okay, let's talk about the father first. You want to say that the father should be able to do it on his own, and we're going to learn that from, that by Kedushin, the father could do Nedarim on his own. That's what the middle parsha is coming to teach me. If that's true, why do I need the first parsha to tell me that if he's not an Arusa, the father could be meifir? If he could do it when there is an Arusa, when there's an Arus that also has rights, certainly if he's the only one who has rights, he can do it on his own. Then the first parsha would be redundant. Obviously, in the middle parsha, you can only do it together with the husband, and therefore I need the first parsha to tell me that if she's not an Arusa, there's no Arus there, then he could do it completely on his own. Says Gemara, okay, maybe the husband could do it on his own. Maybe the father needs a husband, but the husband can't do the father. And the Gemara says, maybe there's no chiddush of saying that the father has rights. Obviously, it's part of a father's innate rights, which we know a father has in a daughter. Why do I need to say that? So I would need as a chiddush to tell me that the father has a right to be making. He has a right to support the neder, and then it can't be canceled. But that he has a right to cancel it, that you don't see. Somewhere says in 1 second, if, as you're saying, the husband could be meifir on his own when it's an arusa, why would you need to tell me that he could be meifir when there's nesuin, when she's a nesua? Obviously, kavachomer, if he could be meifir when she's an arusa and she's not fully in his rishus, he could certainly be meifir when he's on his own and she is fully in his rishus. Says Gemara, no, maybe the third parsha where she's fully in his rishus is to teach me that only when she makes the neder in his rishus can he be meifir, but if she made it before, he can't. Gemara says, well, from that halacha itself, you could see that when she's in arusa, the husband has to work together with the father, and he can't do it on his own. Because if when she's fully in his rishus and she made the neder in his rishus and she's in the nesua, it's only when she's fully when she made the neder in his rishus that he has a right to be meifir on his own. But if she made it earlier, he cannot. Obviously, when there's a partnership with the father involved, then there are other rights he has to share. So it would make sense to say that if she was a arusa, he would not be able to be meifir on his own. Now the Gemara offers another way of understanding that she was mikudeshes and not talking about nesua in the middle parsha, because he uses the word havaya. It says kiddushin. It says v'im siyeh leish. That's a word that always means kedushin and not nesuin.